on two there. Well into the 80s. Here we have a character from the X-Men, Storm. You would have seen her earlier in the Cochrane cover of X-Men 100. Here she's been made over radically to be part of, I'd like you two to tell me, but 80s street fashion.
Yeah, it kind of looks a little dated, doesn't it? I have a feeling
it's 83, I think.
It may have looked dated when it comes.
Yeah.
It's always dangerous when comics guys try to be at the very cutting edge of fashion. As the writer of The Dazzler, who debuted when disco was already dead, I can tell you that it's playing with fire, you know. So yeah, she has a mohawk. I guess she's darker and more serious and more dangerous, or has a
For those of you who've never read the Dazzler, when the character was first introduced in a story that Danny didn't write, Cyclops sees the Dazzler performing on stage, and the light, because she's mutant, she can do a light show with her own body. He says, "Gee, I know zilch about disco, but this chick is hot." And then they handed the character to Danny to go solo. No, you didn't start it immediately, did you? You didn't do the first Dazzler stories. You took over.
I was involved editorially with the early stories, and then I started writing it with the 5th issue.
I'm talking like a fanboy. Talking like a fanboy now. Let's move on. Legion of Superheroes, one of Paul's most famous assignments, many years on the comics, 13 years and 2 stints. A multiplicity of costumes, maybe greater than any other superhero comic. You need for someone like me, you need a score sheet to keep the characters straight. But
I needed one to write it. But I think part of what the readership enjoyed was the fertility of it. The period here is a wonderful artist named Keith Giffen, who had an extraordinary visual imagination. And again, going back to the collaborative sense, as the writer, you are trying to give the artist suggestions that will inspire their visual imagination in service of the narrative. And when you're working with a guy like Keith or many of the other people we've talked about here, you give them a simple cue and they go off in a whole other direction and begin building something very distinctive where you do get emotion out of the costume, you get communication out of it. And it's a very, very different art form. The Legion of Superheroes, when it started in the 1960s, had a wonderfully solid artist named John Fort drawing it, and every single costume was basically a variation on the same 4 variables. It was blue, it was pink, it had a additional little chest plate, but all the same basic tools assembled. By this time, Keith would go off and do anything in the universe and bring it in.
I mean, for those of you who know, but others won't, the Legion exists in a completely futuristic science fiction world in the 30th century. There's no Clark Kent element. Everything is futuristic. They fit into their world as much as the rest of us fit into this world. Does that make it a different kind of story to create the look for?
Well, it makes it a much more open canvas because you can suddenly essentially have everything be costume. You know, we're visiting a planet that is a colder world than ours. How does that work? What becomes the iconography of it? Do you have everybody running around with fur collars on in the process, or are they running around in the equivalent of hazmat suits that are all internally heated? And both of those are valid ways to tell that story, but you have to play with it to try and find a consistent kind of science fiction logic to the thing.
Two sides to the 1980s. We have Paul taking his readers to the outer reaches of the galaxy, while Danny, this is from the 60s, this is Superman throwing his costume away, and we're going to lead Spider-Man. I said Spider-Man throwing his costume away, and we're going to lead into your big costume change on Spider-Man in the 80s. Do you want me to put that one up first, or?
Sure. Well, this has been homaged and copied so many times, but you can't. I mean, talk about an inanimate object speaking volumes. It's just, there's Peter Parker framed by the rain clouds and the rain, and he just had it. It's that moment where he's decided, that the responsibility of being Spider-Man is too much, and that's it. And he just tosses it in the garbage can. And I mean, the costume definitely has a life of its own. You just see that forlorn hand, the glove in the bottom that almost looks like a comforting hand on the foot of the suit. I mean, you can just read so much. A lot of the wonderful thing about the superhero costume, Batman and Spider-Man, is what you can do with the eyes. I mean, that was part of why that Milgram shot looked so expressive, because if you go from panel to panel in any comic, the eyes are never the same. They have all this expression, and which in Spider-Man you have to do because there's no other facial features you can see. But that's, that really just says, I'm not that guy anymore. That suit is an empty suit, and to hell with everybody and everything.
So you made him totally different.
Yeah, this was my immortal cover copy, The Rumors Are True, introducing the new Spider-Man. That was also a testament to the growth of the fan press, because I mean, if you put The Rumors Are True in a comic in 1945, nobody would have known what the hell you were talking about. But the fact that there was a rumor mill and that people got advance word, so it was playing to that. And then, of course, this was really the first time that an iconic character first time Spider-Man, anyway, because I can think of a million Superman stories where he changed costumes, but it was the first time Spider-Man had ever changed the costume, and this excited a lot of controversy. This was the living suit, which became the Venom suit. This kept a life of its own, and it was tied in with a whole promotional series called Secret War. So Spider-Man came back with this suit, and then you'd have to read the Secret War series to find out why. But this was a shocking thing, and it's laid out in a manner highly reminiscent of that Amazing Fantasy 15, which was the first Spider-Man appearance. So that's believe it or not, in retrospect, it's kind of funny to think that people were genuinely shocked and it was very controversial. How dare you, even for one issue? And but then it turned out to be very popular. It was a thing we were going to do for a few months, and then it was so popular, we kept on. And then when the living suit left him, he had a cloth suit. But it was certainly a considered a bold thing at the time.
I'm going to flick through a few more images. Here we have the Spider-Man movie version. I don't know if you want to make some comment about that, Danny or Paul.
No, it was a clever thing to do, to put the shiny raised webs on there. Definitely gives it a powerful look for a movie.